turn takes us through China's remarkable transformation.
What if the world's most powerful weapon is not a missile, not an aircraft carrier, and not even a nuclear bomb? What if the real weapon is something so ordinary that most people never think about it? A handful of minerals, tiny computer chips, and billion-dollar loans. For decades, the United States dominated the world through military power. Whenever conflict erupted, America responded with fighter jets, warships, and military bases across the globe. But while the world was watching America's military, another country was quietly building a completely different kind of power. China. Instead of trying to control countries with weapons, China focused on controlling the resources and technologies that modern economies simply cannot survive without. Today, many experts believe this strategy has given China leverage that even the world's strongest militaries cannot easily overcome. And the most surprising part? This plan was built slowly, patiently, over several decades. By the time most countries realized what was happening, China had already secured some of the most important economic choke points on Earth. So how did China do it? The first piece of the puzzle is something hidden inside almost every device you use every day. Silver? Most people think of silver as jewelry or an investment. But in reality, silver is one of the most important industrial metals in the world. It is essential for solar panels, electric vehicles, smartphones, power grids, medical equipment, military electronics, and advanced weapons. Without silver, many modern industries would struggle to function. Now, here is where things become interesting. China is not just one of the largest producers of silver. It also consumes more silver than any other country. Chinese factories manufacture enormous numbers of solar panels, batteries, electronics, and electric vehicles, creating massive demand. As a result, companies around the world often sell their silver directly to China because Chinese buyers frequently pay higher prices than anyone else. Over time, China quietly became the center of the global silver market. Then, something changed. Instead of treating silver like a normal commodity, China began treating it as a strategic national resource. Exports became more restricted while domestic industries received priority. That means less silver reaches foreign manufacturers, making supply tighter for countries that depend on imports. Even business leaders started raising concerns because industries around the world rely on stable silver supplies. And silver is only the beginning, because China's real advantage lies in something even more valuable: rare earth elements. Despite the name, these materials are not especially rare. They exist in many countries. The problem is not finding them. The problem is processing them. Refining rare earths is extremely expensive, environmentally challenging, and politically unpopular. Many Western countries gradually moved away from this industry. China made the opposite decision. For decades, it invested billions into mining, refining, and building complete supply chains. Today, China processes the overwhelming majority of the world's rare earth materials. Even minerals mined in countries like Australia or the United States are often shipped to China for refining before returning to manufacturers. That gives Beijing extraordinary influence. Why? Because these elements are found inside almost everything: electric cars, wind turbines, artificial intelligence servers, smartphones, robots, satellites, radar systems, missiles, night vision equipment, modern fighter jets. Without these materials, production slows down almost immediately. And unlike oil, replacing this supply is not something countries can do overnight. Building new processing plants would require years of construction, billions of dollars, skilled workers, and government approvals. China knows this, and it has already shown that it is willing to use this advantage. Years ago, during a political dispute with Japan, China restricted rare earth exports. Prices surged almost instantly, sending shockwaves through global markets. It was proof that these resources were no longer just commodities. They had become geopolitical weapons. But if controlling raw materials gives China leverage, controlling advanced technology gives it even more. And that brings us to the world's most important island, Taiwan. Most people think tensions over Taiwan are purely political, but there is another reason the island matters so much. Semiconductors, tiny computer chips that power almost everything: your phone, your laptop, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, military equipment, medical devices, modern cars, even advanced missiles depend on them. Many famous companies like Apple, Nvidia, and AMD design their own chips. But designing a chip and manufacturing one are completely different things. Most of the world's most advanced chips are produced by a single company, TSMC, and TSMC operates almost entirely from Taiwan. This means one relatively small island manufactures the majority of the world's cutting-edge semiconductors. Imagine if those factories suddenly stopped operating. Artificial intelligence development would slow dramatically. Consumer electronics would become scarce. Automobile production would suffer. Defense industries across multiple countries would face major shortages. The global economy could experience one of the biggest supply chain disruptions in modern history. That is why Taiwan has become one of the most strategically important places on Earth. And it explains why tensions around the island continue to grow. Because whoever controls the world's most advanced chips gains enormous influence over the future of technology. But controlling resources and technology is only half of China's strategy. The next phase is even more ambitious. Instead of conquering countries with armies, China began connecting them with roads, railways, ports, and massive infrastructure projects. On the surface, it looks like economic development. Behind the scenes, it is one of the biggest geopolitical projects in modern history. It is called the Belt and Road Initiative. Launched in 2013, its goal was simple: help developing nations build the infrastructure they desperately need. China offered billions of dollars in loans to build highways, ports, rail networks, airports, and power plants. For many countries, it sounded like the perfect opportunity. Western lenders often imposed strict conditions before approving loans. China moved much faster. Money arrived quickly, construction started immediately, and giant projects began appearing across Asia, Africa, Europe, and Latin America. Today, more than 140 countries have participated in Belt and Road projects worth well over $1 trillion. At first glance, everyone seemed to benefit. Countries received modern infrastructure. China expanded its global trade network. But there was one problem. Many of these projects were incredibly expensive, and some never generated enough income to repay the loans. That is where China's real leverage began. One of the most famous examples is Sri Lanka. The country wanted to build a huge deep-water port that could become a major shipping hub in the Indian Ocean. China financed the project with loans worth more than $1 billion. Construction was completed, but the port failed to attract enough business. Sri Lanka struggled to repay its debt. Eventually, the government agreed to hand over control of the port to a Chinese state-owned company under a 99-year lease. No invasion, no military action, no war. A strategically important port changed hands through financial agreements. This is why critics often describe parts of the Belt and Road Initiative as debt diplomacy. Supporters argue China is helping developing countries build modern infrastructure. Critics believe these loans create long-term dependence that gives Beijing greater geopolitical influence. Either way, the result is the same. China now has influence over key ports, railways, and trade routes across much of the world. And when you connect all the pieces together, a clear strategy begins to emerge. First, control the raw materials. Then control the factories that process them. Control the technology the world depends on. Build infrastructure across international trade routes. And finally, create long-term financial relationships that expand political influence. Each piece strengthens the next. Each one makes China more difficult to replace. But perhaps the most remarkable part of this strategy is that it happened quietly. There were no dramatic invasions, no global wars, no headlines announcing that China was becoming indispensable to the world's economy. It happened gradually, year after year, investment after investment, mine after mine, port after port. Until one day the world realized that replacing China would not be nearly as easy as many had assumed. And now countries are racing to respond. The United States is investing billions into domestic semiconductor manufacturing. New rare earth processing facilities are being built outside China. Supply chains are slowly shifting toward countries like India, Vietnam, Australia, and Mexico. But rebuilding decades of industrial capacity cannot happen overnight. Many experts believe it could take years or even decades to reduce this dependence. And that is exactly why China's strategy has been so effective. It was never designed for quick victories. It was designed for patience. While other nations focused on military strength and short-term politics, China focused on the foundations of the global economy. The factories, the minerals, the supply chains, the infrastructure, the technologies that quietly keep the modern world running. Whether this strategy ultimately succeeds remains uncertain. Economic slowdowns, demographic challenges, rising debt, and growing international competition are creating new obstacles for Beijing. At the same time, countries around the world are becoming far more aware of the risks of relying too heavily on a single nation. The coming decades may determine whether China strengthens its position or whether the rest of the world successfully breaks these economic choke points. One thing, however, is already clear. The biggest battles of the 21st century may not be fought with bombs or bullets. They may be fought over minerals hidden beneath the ground, factories filled with advanced machines, and tiny computer chips no larger than your fingernail. Because in today's world, controlling supply chains may be just as powerful as controlling armies. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: the world's most powerful weapon is not always the one that makes the loudest noise. Sometimes it is the one no one notices until it is already too late.